Hello, welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast. My name is William Hemsworth. Thank you so much for joining me for today's show. Well, today we start Matthew chapter 17. We're going to look at verses 1 through 3. And these next few verses talk about what's known as the transfiguration of Jesus. So again, Matthew chapter 17, verses 1 through 3 say, "And after 6 days Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother, and led him up a high mountain apart. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his garments became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him." So very interesting here. Jesus takes a small group, his inner circle, if you will, some early church leaders, and it helps strengthen them. And this also affirms his divine sonship. And so here Jesus unveils his glory, which we're going to see later on in the resurrection, and it's shared by angels, if you will. And this has a lot of Old Testament background. And if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you've heard me talk about how Matthew presents Jesus as the new Moses. This motif kind of continues here. And so the Old Testament background kind of shadows Moses and Mount Sinai, as we see in Exodus. So for one reason, both happen on the seventh day. We read that in this verse where, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John up the mountain. So it happens on the seventh day. Both of these occurrences happen on a mountain, Moses and Jesus. Jesus and Moses took 3 people with them. The face of Jesus and Moses shined brightly with God's presence. And both events ended with God speaking audibly, if you will, like a heavenly voice. So there's a lot of parallels here. And it also represents the testimony of who Jesus is. The testimony of the law that foreshadowed Jesus, talked about him in some respect, and the prophets who prophesied about Jesus, said that he was going to come. And coincidentally, Moses and Elijah were the only Old Testament figures, to hear God's voice. And so because of that, they were able to witness Jesus, witness him in his glory, witness him as the divine lawgiver and priest and prophet of the new covenant. So a lot to unpackage in these 3 verses. A lot of symbolism, a lot of typology. So thank you for joining me on this episode of the Daily Bible Podcast. And we'll catch you tomorrow. Thank you for listening each and every day. God bless you. God bless your families.